Willkommen in einem anderen Aufregens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 12 of my game design series of videos. In this video I'll be providing a brief overview of Napoleonic's large army or large battle scale rules. Each episode of my video series are divided based on the size of the total formation a player could be expected to command in a game and come home after a day of gaming. Typically 50 elements per side over 12 game turns is the maximum a single player can handle for a 4 to 6 hour game. There are some exceptions, but this is a good ground rule. Games which involve multiple players per side can command larger forces, but these games require a large playing area which can be set up for several months, allowing for the lads to drop by each Thursday for a beer and pizza to play a single game turn. That way a 12 game turn game can be completed in 12 weeks. My scaling for this video, that is the breakdown or the categorization of each video, is based on club games which need to be completed in a day with no more than 6 hours of gaming and 1 hour to set up, pack up at each end. Rules which use a scale of greater than 1,000 men per element, or use alternatively a big base system, movement tray, etc., are firmly focused on having a game rather than the modelling aspect, although the modelling aspect still does exist, it's just not the main game. In many cases these rules have a very board gaming feel to it, which may turn off some figure gamers. On the other hand, recreating Napoleon's army at Waterloo in 6mm does have a certain attraction to it, and unfortunately the only way you can achieve that is using board game mechanics. If a player wishes to reproduce a large battle of 100,000 men per side, then this is the scale they need to focus on. Players can command forces of between 62,000 men and 125,000 men per side using this scale covered in the video. Leipzig may require an extra large game over an extended period, but some of the rules in the video can even cater for this battle. Incidentally, this is the scale that I've ended up gravitating towards. I want to recreate an entire Napoleonic battle within a reasonable time frame. This is the only scale that allows that to occur. The battles which this scale can allow players to reproduce include most of the most famous and would attract any Napoleonic gamer. This is largely the reason why I've gravitated towards this scale. When I want to recreate a Napoleonic battle, I want to recreate Wagram or something like Eylau, and in order to do that, I need this scale of rules to achieve that. Many of the rules covered in this video uses big bases, movement trays or whatever you want to call them, which means that there is a large base. This means there's a large base or movement tray which represents the unit, and the figures are placed on top of the big base, and they represent to a large extent strength points, and in some cases they even only represent bling. Now, using this system, you can actually have a lot more than 50 elements on the playing area, but the point being is that the elements, the number of elements that you do combat and movement should be limited to 50. There are some hybrid rules, such as Bloody Big Napoleonic Battle, which uses a system similar to Corps Commander's Napoleonic rules, where the elements in base-to-base contact represents the big base. You don't actually need the movement tray, you just simply group your elements together, and that represents a single unit. I suppose other rules could also use this system, but I've never seen a game where this is done, apart from Bloody Big Napoleonic Battles. The other exception, of course, is a board game conversion, but this is a board game style of rules, which obviously is understandable. In this case, you don't need movement trays to a large extent. You have individual elements which represent comparatively large formations. Snappy Nappy, first edition, is an operational level Napoleonic set of rules in which armies maneuver around the countryside before closing for battle. This is to say unusual for most Napoleonic gamers or figure gamers. In a two-player game, each player takes on the role of an army commander. In a multiplayer game, each player takes the roles of corps commanders. Unique fast-play hitless combat system is used based on morale and using a d6 hit dice. Designed as a beginner's game, my initial feeling is it's designed really for more than one player on each side. This is rather weird, but the main reason why I've never bothered to get a copy was its cover. There is something about the cover and the name which really turns me off these rules. However, that does not mean that they are not good rules, and I need to learn not to judge a book by its cover and also name. Folge and Bayonet is written by Frank Chadwick and Greg Novak and was first published in 1994. A second edition, Folge and Bayonet Road to Glory, was released in 2008. Like the first edition, Folge and Bayonet Road to Glory is a miniatures rule system designed to model warfare in the period from 1700 to 1900. The aim of the rules is to allow major battles to be refought, and as such, troop and time scales allow the deployment of large bodies of troops on the wargaming table. Further, in Folge and Bayonet, the role of the player is defined as that of the corps or army commander, thus the divisional and to a lesser extent or greater extent brigade or regimental detail is generally below the level of player involvement. Having such a wide time span, the rules also use specific period rules, which will allow the flavour of these sub-periods to be added in or removed as required. This allows one basic set of rules to be used for armies from several periods. Folge and Bayonet is not aimed at competition play and certainly not for play between armies from different sub-periods. It is, however, ideal for refighting historical battles, scenarios and entire campaigns. Indeed, with Folge and Bayonet battles such as Gettysburg, Ligny or even Waterloo can be all fought on your wargames table, something not possible with many other rule sets. However, for those players wishing to play fictitious scenarios, a point system is available and we frequently use this for generating games with considerable success. I personally feel these rules are extremely good, and while there are some aspects I'm not too keen about, such as the element size, generally if you're interested in this scale and interested in reproducing entire battles, this is a set of rules you most certainly have to look at. Polymos Napoleonic Marshal the Emperor is another big base set of rules, or movement tray-based set of rules, with players commanding 30 to 50 bases, each containing a number of 6mm elements, which I assume represent strength points. As with the big base rules, the focus is on formation manoeuvre, but the number of big bases seem rather large, but would allow you to field a force of 100,000 men. The feedback I get is the rules are simple and fun to play, being very fast to play. I'm rather impressed with these rules. If you like big base or movement tray rules, which are fast, this could be the rules that you should aim towards. I'm guessing the speed of play would result in a very averaging out of history. I would also assume this is probably in many ways similar to Blucher. There is a smaller scale version called Polymos Napoleonic Division as well, if you're interested in different scales. Bloody Big Battles is a set of rules designed for the late 19th century warfare, with amendments for Napoleonic warfare called Bloody Big Napoleonic Battles, created back in 2018. When I initially saw these rules, most gamers were using huge maps with big bases containing the elements. However, I've noticed these days, playing Napoleonic specifically, most gamers use standard elements, which are grouped into larger units. It is a reasonably unrestricted set of rules, unlike Blucher, and the game scale basically ensures you complete a game within 12 game turns or less. Bloody Big Napoleonic Battle does use orders and messengers to regulate activity, but it seems to flow reasonably well nonetheless. I personally don't like orders, but it seems to work well in these rules. The sequence of play is very simple, with move, defender fire, attacker fire, assault being the main phases. These rules have a strong focus on reproducing historical battles, and for players who wish to focus on that objective, may be the best set of rules for you to consider. Blucher rules are rather interesting as well as being rather unusual. These rules can be played with blocks instead of figures, or board game pieces for that matter, so that they are similar in concept, in many ways to the ancients' Lost Battles set of rules. If using figures, you mount and base a unit in any manner you wish. What is important is the unit rather than the figures which are contained within the unit. The rules uses a pip system, with the opponents determining your pips and then revealing them when you run out of command points. The units are supposed to be hidden until revealed. These rules are really designed for 6mm and have a major focus on making life random for each player, which is a good thing. The primary focus is playability, and while they are supposed to simulate historical conflicts, they do so in an abstract manner. They are beautiful rules, and while I initially resisted, I will probably also purchase the cards. Grosse is a figure game version of the SPI Napoleonic War board game. SPI has about 14 games in the series, and I've converted all the scenarios into a format which can be played using figures. The main difference between the board game and the figure game is hexes have been replaced with the concept of base widths, movement zones of control and combat zones of control. There are no hexes on the playing area, as I hate any kind of gridding on playing areas for figure gaming. Apart from this change, they play identically to the board game, as long as your playing area duplicates the SPI map reasonably closely. I created this conversion for new players. I wanted to recruit new players. These rules are extremely simple and simulate a historical battle rather well. They are also very quick to play, with the first day of the Battle of Nations lasting only 4 game turns, and you could easily play that in 2 to 3 hours, but with 12 game turns being more common for most of the other games. I must admit I was surprised how well they have worked, and they're my primary set of rules that I use at the present moment. They will never replace those players who wish to field these rules will never satisfy players who wish to field specific regiments, but at this scale no rules cater to that particular desire. If we ignore Snappy Nappy, which are supposed to have been first printed in 1994, which I must find rather unusual, and I do need to verify this, although I suspect it's accurate, but if we ignore it for the moment, the very first set of rules which kicked off this particular scale was most likely Volley and Bayonet in 2008. In the short time period since 2008, or 1994 if you assume that Snappy Nappy was the first in this scale, several additional rules have been published, all of which I would generally call big base or movement tray based rules. Possibly the most popular set of rules is Blucher, and almost everyone I personally know seems to be very enthusiastic about these rules, although I have seen some enthusiasm also for Snappy Nappy. In the last years since I first started creating this video, I've seen a lot of activity in creating Napoleonic scenarios for Bloody Big Napoleonic Battle, and that set of rules is really gaining traction in this segment, and only growing. I can see why. They allow you to refight Leipzig on a reasonably sized table, taking about 2 days, and do so with a high degree of historical accuracy. Possibly these are not good for new players, but many of the experienced Napoleonic players seem to be gravitating in the direction of these rules, specifically players that want to recreate entire battles. For new players, Blucher has all the bling that they require, and that is a powerful motivation. But most of the experienced players did not seem to have the same level of enthusiasm for Blucher that, let's say, new players would have. You need both simple entry sets of rules and more complex or historically accurate rules, and this is provided in this scale, which is a very good sign. For myself, I'm primarily using the SPI board game conversion, which I call Grosse Schlachten for new players, and I generally use Bloody Big Napoleonic Battle for more serious games when I have games at this scale. The other set of rules which I put a lot of effort into is DBN, but I have to be honest, I'm still not certain if it's suitable for games involving more than 12 elements a side. Let's take a look at figure scale. 6mm is all about mass looks. You can organise your formations in a manner which makes your playing area look like a real battlefield. It also encourages large units, with the figures representing strength points, or just bling. Blucher fits into this scale perfectly, as does Bloody Big Napoleonic Battle. I have created a 6mm army primarily for Grosse Schlachten, but when I look at Bloody Big Napoleonic Battle, which was also a set of rules I was considering using 6mm, I've decided I'll probably start with 15mm, and if it works, stay with that scale. If it fails, then I may move to 6mm for that. Also, in reference to figure scale, the big difference between 25mm and 6mm figures is the former is all about how you maneuver elements, while the latter is about moving large blocks of troops forward and getting a resolution, with little if any concern about the exact way your element pivots. Thus, figure scale does tend to prefer different scales of rules. At this scale, I'd say 6mm is a sweet spot, Although 15mm also fits into this area, it's unlikely that you would field 25mm figures using rules of this particular scale. And so we come to a conclusion of my episode 12 of my video on game system design, which in this case provides an overview of Napoleonic large army scale figure gaming rules. Alle guten Dingen, kommen zu einem Ende.